Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our World Mental Health Day live panel discussion. My name is Evan Judge, and I'll be hosting today's session for you all. What we would like you to do is use the Q&A function to ask any questions that you might have during the session, and we'll try and get to those with our panel towards the end. But before we go any further, let me start by introducing our panel to you. And we are very lucky that we've got some external guests with us today. For those of you that have done your mental health first aid training with USS, you would have at some point met Keith, who is our mental health first aid instructor, and he's joined us today to give some of his valued input. And we've also luckily enough to have Abigail from Mental Health First Aid England, who are our mental health first aid trainer providers. So thank you very much, Abigail, for joining us. And then, as always, we've got Harjeet, head of people, joining us today. And then I'll be facilitating and kind of asking all the awkward questions to the panel to get us going through the session. But like I said, if any of you have got any questions that you would like to ask the panel at some point, just feel free to use the Q&A function and pop those in the chat, and we will get to those towards the end. So let's start by first looking at what World Mental Health Day actually is. So every year, the World Health Organization recognizes World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October. The theme for 2022 is around making mental health and well-being for all a global priority. World Mental Health Day is a chance for us to really talk about mental health a little bit more openly in general, and how we look at and how we can actually look after our mental health a little bit better, and why it's important for us to acknowledge that everybody has got some form of mental health, either good mental health or poor mental health. And it's important for us to understand that there is support available, and if we do need to reach out to people, that there are people that we're able to talk to. It's a great opportunity for us to really put into the spotlight everybody's mental health and actually have these open conversations in these forums. So without any delay, let's start by first looking at mental health, because we often talk about it, but what I wanted to do is share with you, just give us an opportunity to visualize what it could be like living with depression for 48 hours. So if you can and you're able, why not close your eyes and just envisage you starting your normal working day. And it might start with you waking up in a comfortable bed, in a comfortable place in your own home. And for whatever reason, that particular day, you don't feel quite yourself. It's hard to put a finger on what you're feeling, but you don't want to get out of bed. You can't even force a smile. And everything seems like a lot more hard work to get through any particular part of your day. But you muster every bit of energy you've got, and you get yourself in the car, you get yourself on the bus or on the train to go to work, and you get to work. And during that journey to work, you're constantly doubting yourself, constantly thinking about all those life decisions that have got you to that exact moment in time that you are at. And you're doubting everything that you've ever done. As you go into work, you're greeted by friendly colleagues, familiar faces, people that genuinely do care about you. And some of them may ask, are you okay? You don't seem yourself. But you push through, and you do the bare minimum to get through the day, trying to keep underneath the radar. And during that journey home, you are thinking about all those conversations, those awkward interactions that you had, and you start doubting everything that you've done during that course of the day. And all of this is building up, and all of this is causing you more stress, anxiety, and you feeling lower and lower. And rather than doing your normal after work activities, those things that bring you joy, or maybe some household chores, you just find yourself going straight into your bed and hiding away for the rest of the evening. And during that time, you're left with your own thoughts. And again, you're overthinking and you're living with all this added pressure and guilt. And during this time, you might be conflicted with thoughts of self-harm or things, potentially even suicidal thoughts. And during that time, you're left thinking, how am I going to cope with going through the same process the next day, and the next day, and the next day? But the next day comes, and it might be a little bit harder than the day before, it might be a little bit easier, but you get through that day. And even though you're constantly faced with all these thoughts of doubt and negativity about how you are as a person, or if you can actually carry on living in a particular way, you manage to get through. And gradually the days get easier, and the days get a little bit brighter, and it's easier to smile, and it's easier to get out of bed. And eventually you're back to what you would like to say is your normal self. So if you want to open your eyes now and just think, that could be anyone's story, but maybe that's been 48 hours that you've lived through. But that's 48 hours that I often live through. I've lived with some form of depression since I can remember, since I was a teenager. And during those times, I've had incidences where I felt like it's too much to carry on. And what we're trying to do here is normalize these conversations, because all too often we talk about the fact that having mental illness or health is a bad thing. All of us go through periods of poor mental health. Some it affects us more than others, and what we need to be doing is having these more real, honest, open conversations about, it's okay if you feel this way, as long as you're asking for help and you're reaching out for help. And we want to encourage people that are going through these periods of time to feel comfortable enough to be able to ask for that help and ask for that support. So my challenge to you on this World Mental Health Day is to actually say, you know what, if you're struggling, reach out. And if there is somebody in your business that you feel is maybe not themselves, go to them and ask them that question of, are you okay? And ask them twice, and have all those interactions that we've had all the training through from Mental Health First Aid England and Keith, and all of that sort of good stuff that we know can help people, just by sitting and listening with them. So hopefully that was a positive start. I know it seemed a bit bleak for a moment or two, but positive that we can all feel comfortable in sharing our own journeys and our own experiences, and not hide away from those, and not be ashamed that we've lived through those sorts of experiences. I know that everyone who's done the mental health first aid training has always talked very highly of how Keith is so open about his own experiences. Keith, I don't know if there's anything that you want to share about how your people respond to your own experiences and situations.
Yeah, we take a little bit of time, Evan, on the course to talk about sort of personal experiences, I guess, and I share some of my story, which is sort of living with bipolar through the years. I think the biggest challenge in my mind is actually accepting that you do have the issues in the first place. It's building insight, even in a conversation that you're having with somebody who doesn't have a mental health condition but is struggling a little bit with stress. The most important thing I think you can do is get them to recognize that they need some help, get them to recognize that, the support is out there if they're only prepared to make that important step. So I think for the stories that people share on the course, and I think it's true in a sort of wider context, encouraging people to understand more about themselves is the key issue, because you're better able to support somebody else if you sort of understand your own issues and challenges as well.
Thanks, Keith. I'll come back to you in a moment, Keith, and we can have a bit more of a chat. Let's go on to the rest of our panel, and let's have some questions aimed at them. And the first person I'm going to come to is Harjeet. Harjeet, we've talked a lot about how important it is for our people, how important our people are in our business, and how we can't operate without them. We know that full well. However, it's not uncommon to have team members within our ESS family and our wider Compass Group family to be suffering with mental or mental well-being. If somebody in our business is struggling with mental health, what processes do you take? What resources are available to them, and what should we be doing as individuals, as team members, to support them?
Thanks, Evan, and hi everybody. Hope everyone's well. I guess what we tend to do is that there's so much information and resources that are available that it can be quite overwhelming. So we do always encourage people to speak to their line managers, reach out to a mental health first aider, a member of the people team, or whoever it is that you feel comfortable talking to. We've got the UMatter training that's hosted on the L&D portal. Again, there's lots of information there, whether it's training sessions, webinars, and kind of signposting data. We've also got a host of information that we've got from an ESS point of view when it comes to our wellness commitment and how we manage people through their mental health. And I think more recently than anything, one thing that I've kind of come to the realization is, you know, a top tip that I'd say is just to be kind to yourself and, you know, try and control what you can. And I think that when you start to look at kind of everything that's evolved from the pandemic till now, there's a lot more information readily available from a mental health perspective. You know, you can just go into Google and you've got all the NHS campaigns, and it can be quite overwhelming. So, you know, if anybody has any questions, feels a bit lost in terms of where to go, please reach out to me. Happy to kind of help, and I can kind of signpost where I can. But the one thing I would say is to really reflect what I've been doing recently and just be kind to myself, and just to think about things that I can control and those things that I can't. And that kind of just helps you kind of get things into the right buckets. And that's whether it's in your work life or your personal life. So that's one thing I'd kind of recommend that we kind of look at.
Great, thanks, Irene. I mean, yeah, that circle of control and what's in your control and what's out of your control is a key thing for me, because I could end up stressing and getting anxious about things that I've got no control over whatsoever. Yeah. So yeah, great advice there. Thanks, Rajesh. Next, we're going to go to Abigail or Abby. And Abby, thank you firstly for joining us from Mental Health First Aid England and for being a part of today. I've got a great bit of question for you, in that workplace mental health support is extremely important to kind of support us, our colleagues and each other, but there is also an important step to make a change sort of in the local community, national, internationally. What do you think we should be doing as individuals or as an organization, do you think, as to be supporting the communities in terms of mental health?
Thanks, Evan, and thank you everyone for having me. Yeah, so that is a great question, and I think through having sort of mental health first aiders in the workplace, you're already taking a big step to kind of improve the culture and the way we talk about mental health in the workplace. What we realise is, although we can kind of signpost people onto your EAP or onto the GP, there's also a very useful tool called the Hub of Hope. And what that does is it allows you to, wherever you're located, to go in and see what's available for you. So if you have, for example, an eating disorder, or you suffered with a personality disorder, or whatever it was, you'd be able to go on, put your location in there, and it will show you what kind of support groups are out there. So I think really what is important is kind of becoming together as a community, being open about your personal struggles, and signposting one another to these kind of support groups. I think it's a big thing, and that is something now that we're looking at nationally and internationally as well. So we are obviously Mental Health First Aid England, which means we're in England, but there are other mental health first aid companies around the world as well. So it's just a little bit more around signposting people onto those organisations and looking, you know, what's being done there, what's available there, and how that is similar, yet how it can be different as well for the other mental health first aid organisations around the world. But yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think it's just bringing everyone together is, like you said, completely normalising talking about mental health, sharing your stories, and just supporting one another, and just becoming an active listener really is another one as well. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Thanks, Abby. Hub of Hope is a great resource, isn't it? And just explain to people where they can find it. So it's an app. It's a website, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So we have the Mental Health First Aiders app that's going to become available shortly. Whether you have access to it already or not, I'm unsure of. But on there's an element of Hub of Hope. So you click onto there and it will bring it up. You'll have like a postcode search. You'll put in where you're based. And then you also put in what's the subject you want to look at, and it will come up with all the local support groups for you, and it is also available as its own separate app and on the website as well. So that's Hub of Hope.
Great. I was actually talking to somebody the other day about getting mental health support for one of their family members, and they said that we're reaching out to local communities and local groups, and they couldn't find anything that was still open or available after COVID. And I pointed them in the direction of Hub of Hope, and they found something within seconds. So it was great that we were able to do that. So thanks very much, Abby. We'll come back to you later if that's okay. So my next question is for Keith. Keith, again, yeah, thank you so much for all of the great training that you've delivered for our mental health first aiders. To say that we get positive feedback would be an understatement. Everyone is extremely complimentary of you and the training that you deliver. So thank you very much, and thank you for joining us for today. We often talk about how important it is to be open and talk about mental health, but I think a lot of people might not know or understand how best to approach somebody that they might think is struggling or experiencing some difficulty. We've learned that we don't need to have any special training for this. We just need to be able to talk to them, ask them how they are. But do you have any advice or guidance as to how you would engage with somebody in terms of having a meaningful conversation about mental health?
Sure, thanks, Evan. And let me just say at the start that it's been a pleasure working with ESS over the last 2 and a bit years to actually roll out the mental health first aid program, which has been great. So many committed people within the business who really are trying to make a difference as mental health first aiders. So it's been a pleasure working with you guys. In terms of the conversation, one of the big challenges in initiating a conversation is people's level of comfort when they sort of approach somebody. In a lot of instances, people feel that they're going to be judged, they're going to be seen as somebody who can't cope. So they don't actually initiate that conversation as readily as they might. But often there are some signs that somebody might be struggling, and then puts the onus on you as a colleague to maybe make that first step, to open up that conversation, to say to the individual, it's okay not to be okay. And as Evan said, ask that question, are you okay? Just don't just ask it once, ask it twice, so you can really understand what might be going on. So you're really looking for signs that somebody might be struggling a little. They might become a bit withdrawn. They may sort of be ruminating on problems, not easy to resolve them, and their ability to make decisions is impacted. You can also see somebody's difficulties with stress almost in their body language. They feel this very stooped, as if the weight of the world is literally on their shoulders. That's how overwhelming stress can make people. And the cornerstone to any meaningful conversation around mental health is actually got to be based on trust and empathy. People are not going to open up if they don't feel you can be trusted, that you're genuinely there as somebody who wants to listen to their story. And you can build empathy in a number of different ways. Some of it is just showing that you're concerned, showing that you want to help, that you want to be supportive, and be specific about things that you might have noticed. You know, not accusatory, but to say, I've noticed that you're not quite yourself at the moment. I noticed you didn't make the usual contribution in the recent meeting. Is everything okay? that being specific and showing concern can just create the right environment for somebody to be prepared to open up. And environment is important, you know, where you have this conversation is key. Somewhere where somebody's feeling comfortable, you know, in a crowded room may not be a great idea. Taking somebody off site for a coffee might be a good way of encouraging them to open up. So you're trying to really overcome that sense of fear that people have. That fear of opening up might make them feel that they're going to be judged, they're going to be treated differently. What you're trying to do is listen. You know, the most important skill, and we talk about this on the mental health first aid program, is about your ability to listen, to allow somebody to open up. You don't need to say a lot. You know, the conversation should be skewed to all things that they want to say, things that they want to get off their chest. That's the really important part of being a good listener. It's not about judgment. It's not even about offering advice. It's just creating them the space to talk. And as they begin to talk about the difficulties that they've been through, it's amazing how that can help the individual to just get a bit more perspective. You know, begin to talk things through. They begin to realize, well, perhaps there are some things I can do to address this situation. Perhaps if I did this differently, it would make a difference. Maybe if I went to talk to my boss about the situation, maybe there's some adjustments we could make there. So the conversation allows perspective, and it's sort of, you know, as a coping strategy, having a conversation is such a massive way of de-stressing, taking the stress out of a situation, unburdening yourself. You know, problem shared is a problem halved is definitely true.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Keith. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, that having those conversations and just listening has made a lot of difference for a lot of our team members. They felt a lot more comfortable and a lot more relaxed after having a conversation, not with any advice being offered, but not with any sort of extra support given. It's just having those conversations, isn't it? So wonderful. We're now gonna have a think back to the theme of World Mental Health Day, which is making mental health and well-being, making mental health and well-being a global priority. So going back to my panel and maybe starting with Abby and saying again, what would you think would be a way in which we can prioritize making mental health and well-being a global priority?
I think personally, it's going to be about kind of sharing your stories. So having everybody, if they feel confident to, sharing their stories, because I think by sort of understanding what other people may be going through, perhaps in your organisation, it may then give you the confidence to speak out. And then I guess when you look at it as a kind of global, it's interesting. Well, looking at the different types of levels of support through all the different countries, it is a lot more kind of, we're very open to talk about it here, especially Australia, America. So I think it's kind of looking at how can we maybe support one another globally as well. So maybe our stories can be, you know, to go out so everyone can kind of understand what we do here and how we can help others achieve the same. Because as Harjeet said earlier, through the kind of pandemic and how we spoke about mental health before is extremely different to how we speak about it now. We are a lot more open, so it's just kind of making that more of a global thing and more internationally. So offering support where we can, and maybe looking into what else is available, what can we do to help support those globally, really.
And just taking it back to a company level, for us in ESS, Compass Group, we are a global organisation, so we could quite easily share those stories and experiences across our wider community that way and start having those more meaningful conversations. So that's some great things to think about there. Thank you, Abby. Harjeet, looking at it from the workplace and making it a priority for us as ESS or Compass Group, what would you say needs to be our priority?
I think definitely to continue with this agenda in terms of talking about it, building on the great resources that we have. And one thing that I always kind of ask is if anyone's got any suggestions, you know, any assistance that can kind of that you can give us in terms of what we could do differently, what we can do better. You know, are we missing something? Is there more of something you want to see and less of something you can see? So we absolutely welcome any feedback, but we will continue to kind of drive this forward, but also mindful not to overwhelm people. So, you know, we will do it at you know, at a pace that's reasonable, but any advice, any kind of guidance from you guys on the call, that'd be absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Keith, what would you say from your perspective in terms of that theme of making mental health and well-being a priority for what would you say is a way in which we can make that a reality and bring that to life?
I mean, I think the key words in that sort of the theme for World Mental Health Day is for all, is recognizing that we all have mental health. We tend to make an assumption that mental health, you know, is about illness, it's about things that go wrong. We talk a lot on the course about the fact that mental health is on a continuum, and we're all somewhere on that continuum. During the course of our lives, 1 in 4 of us will have issues with our mental health. So it's a large number, but I think it goes wider than that. It's sort of recognizing that, you know, we're all going to find times where we're overwhelmed. Stress is beginning to become an issue. And it's important to acknowledge that and recognize it when it actually happens. So a bit of background noise going on there. So we're all somewhere on that spectrum, and there are some things that I think everybody would benefit from that we sort of assume is only to do with mental illness. Cognitive behavioral therapy, the most common form of talking therapy, at its heart focuses on negative thinking, and I think we're all a bit vulnerable to negative thinking. Most of the time we recognize it and we challenge it. Sometimes though it can begin to overwhelm us a little, and some of the techniques around CBT that help us challenge negativity, to look at things a bit more rationally and objectively, I think could be applied to anybody in any walk of life. So this whole idea of mental health being about everybody's well-being, I think is really important. So the techniques we talk about are all about keeping us well. You know, they're not just about dealing with ill health.
That's great. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, it's about making it a reality for everybody and everyone understanding that mental health can affect us all. So we've had one question come through, which I think Harjeet, you've responded to in terms of additional mental health first aid training. Do you want to just touch on that quickly?
Yep, so we will be running our last course for the year in November. We will then be just kind of taking a bit of a pause, just reflecting on the courses that we have done, the numbers that we've got, and then kind of adding that into the plan for next year. But if anybody is interested, we do have some spaces left in November. So just drop me a note and I can send you further information.
Right, thank you. And then Katrina's asked a question in terms of when somebody is living with depression and they're are at rock bottom, what advice would you give to them or to someone who's around them? Should we act the same as normal, or should we try to show a little bit more compassion through small acts of kindness? Anyone in the panel want to respond to that question? Keith,
I go. I think it's all about sort of trying to encourage people, if they're in that really deep, dark place, to sort of understand what help is actually out there, what support is out there. That can be enormously reassuring in itself. And you're trying to normalize things. Many people go through depression, and there actually is help out there, and it's not a sign of weakness to reach out for that help and support. So I think it's active encouragement to seek help, where hopefully it's warranted. Not everybody with signs of depression, low mood, necessarily needs to see a professional. There may be some things they can do to help themselves, things like lifestyle issues, diet, exercise, sleep, all of those can make a real difference. But I think people are often reticent to reach out to a clinician because they fear that they're going to, if they get a diagnosis, that's going to have some sort of knock-on effect in their career prospects, or what is their friendship group going to make of that? Are they going to be judged? And as a consequence of that, people don't reach out as readily as they might. So it's sort of trying to get them to feel more comfortable that help is out there, and the GP isn't just about prescribing pills. It may be sort of acting as a bit of a gateway to support that exists out there as well. It may direct them towards the Hub of Hope, which Abby mentioned earlier, in terms of the help that might be available there. So it's recognizing that there's a broad range of help and support, and it's not, you know, it's not a sign of weakness to reach out for that help and to go and see a professional.
Yeah, and some great advice there, and that I would also say that maybe if somebody is struggling and they seem to be at rock bottom, potentially just give them 2 things to focus on trying to do. I know that sometimes it can be overwhelming for people, so if you minimize how much they have to think about and how much they have to actually do, so if it is just reach out to a GP and let me know how you get on, that would be the 2 actions that they need to take, and then you follow up with them and make sure that they've done those 2 actions, and then give them bite-sized bits of information or support that they can get, rather than giving them a list of whole range of things that they can do, because sometimes that can overwhelm them even more and not help at all. So little things in small doses, if you are having conversations to those people that are potentially in a pretty dark place at the time. Finally, I just wanted to check with the group if there was anything else they wanted to add after today's conversation, before we close and I share a bit of information about where some support is available through ESS. So any hands up from the panel, so that's great. So just a reminder for all of you that there is loads of information and support available through ESS. We have got 169 mental health first aiders trained in our business, which is wonderful. All of their information can be found through the HSE website. So again, if you have got somebody in your team who might be struggling a bit, or if you want to learn more about what it is to be a mental health first aider, please feel free to reach out to any of those mental health first aiders, or myself or Harjeet. And we'll be happy to answer any of those questions you might have. We obviously have our monthly Healthier Mind newsletter, which is supported through with a monthly toolbox talk on mental health topics. So those still come out, and those are also available on our HSE website. So again, if you've not had an opportunity to have a look at those, please feel free. And then there's loads of videos that we've shared, or webinars that we've done previously that you can go and watch back. But ultimately, if you or any of your team members are struggling, please do feel free to reach out to any of the mental health first aiders, or myself or Harjeet, so that we can support you and your team members as best as we can. That's the most important thing out of today, is that there's no shame in asking for help. There's no shame in asking to where you can find more information. So please do ask if you need it. So one final thing to do from me is just to say thank you to all of the panel for joining. So thank you, Harjeet, thank you, Keith, thank you, Abby. Thank you to Katrina, who's in the background driving all the slides, who's put all this content together for us today. So thank you very much to Katrina. And thank you to all of you for joining, and for those that are watching later on YouTube. So thank you. And we do hope you have a wonderful World Mental Health Day, and we look forward to doing this again next year. And thank you. Have a wonderful day.